and welcome to the monthly show of the Gay Liberation Network. As you noticed, tonight's show is going to address the issue of the still shuttered mental health clinics that our mayor, Lori Lightfoot, promised to reopen. We'll get to that in just a moment, but I would like to introduce our guests. We actually have two and not one. Chewy Campuzano, yeah, and TJ Gordon. Both of these are community activists who are active with the Mental Health Coalition and an organization known as Advance Your Leadership Power, AYCP. So I would like for Chewy and TJ to briefly tell you what they do as community activists. Chewy?
Well, I'm part of the mental health movement coalition that is fighting for the public mental health clinics here in Chicago. As we know, Mayor Lightfoot keeps going back and forth on her promises, and she promises one thing and does another. So, we'll get into that later on. But I fight for disability rights, for mental health rights, as an activist and an advocate.
As a activist myself, I usually fight for disability acceptance in Black and brown communities. I also fight for reform against police violence against people with disabilities, including people with lived experience in the mental health community.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, Lori Lightfoot was a Rahm Emanuel loyalist. She was appointed by Emanuel to the police board and the police oversight group. It's had many different names, but it was basically a whitewash organization to cover up police criminality. But then she decided to run for mayor, and she decided it would be a good idea to pose as a progressive. So she did that. She became the progressive candidate, opposing the machine hack. God, what was her name now? I can't. Perkwinkle, yeah, Toni Perkwinkle. But once in office, Lightfoot sounded more and more like the politician Rahm Emanuel that she replaced. One thing she promised to do, which we're going to focus on tonight, but we're going to raise some other issues as well. But one thing she promised to do was to reopen 6 of the mental health clinics that Emanuel had closed. Now, in her budget plan, the 6 clinics will remain shuttered, and she's come up with a scheme to provide, she claims, mental health services so that those clinics will not need to be reopened. Now, Chewy, what's wrong with that? I mean, why are these 6 closed clinics needed?
People deserve to have the choice to.
Mental health clinics that Emanuel had.
People should have the choice to choose between public and private mental health clinics. From my understanding, and I went to one of those clinics, I've seen how beautiful the community was received in those clinics. Not only that they treat those clinics like mental health clinics, it was more like a community. Where people can come in and get the resources they needed in their community. And primarily the affected communities are in Black and Brown and Latinx communities who don't have the resources and have to travel across town to get to see a provider, to see a psychiatrist, and it's a shame. It's a shame. Like you said, these clinics are closed. One of them has been privatized. I receive services through a private provider right now, but if I had my choice, it would be public mental health because people should have the choice to choose where they feel much comfortable at.
TJ, did you have anything that you would like to add to that?
Yes, I'd also like to add, while the mayor promised that the clinics will reopen, unfortunately it hasn't. It's a very detrimental to communities of color, especially on the west and south sides, because as Tree mentioned, or as mentioned before, people have to go across town to seek the resources they need. Is most often either north side, downtown, or even in the suburbs, which it puts a financial strain on families because that means either paying out of pocket or financial strain on people in general because of added insurance costs possibly, or expenses, or extra transportation costs,
Yeah.
along with the stigma that people with lived experience with mental health in those areas already face. People that don't want to deal with people with dealing with mental health because they see it as a evil instead of something that should be addressed openly
Yeah.
and with kindness.
Well, I think a problem with traveling across the city for mental health services is that you have to cross the turf lines,
Yes.
of the various gangs, and that can be very dangerous. That was much talked about several years ago when Emmanuel closed all those public schools.
Yeah.
That the kids would have to cross these gang turf lines, and Lightfoot should know better. I mean, she should know that it can be dangerous for people to travel around the city, and yet she's proposing to leave those clinics closed. What about the plans that she has to to fill the void that's there because of the closed clinics? She's got this elaborate scheme of services that would be available to people, so they wouldn't need these closed clinics.
I wonder what they are. Because right now she hasn't presented anything on the table in regarding to what she's proposing. From my understanding is if you want mental health clinics, your best choice, and I'm sorry that I'm laughing, but it's very serious, your best choice is to go to Cook County Jail, the biggest provider for mental health.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's something,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
laughable, but, it's something,
well,
it's something very serious, I have to go to jail to get public mental health services when in my community there should be a clinic where I can
Yeah.
go to.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure that Lightfoot would say, well, we can't afford to reopen those clinics. She told the teachers, we can't afford to do everything that you want me to do. We can't afford social workers. We can't afford librarians. But there's plenty of money for already wealthy developers. It's amazing. Just like under Rahm Emanuel, the TIF money is there, the tax increment financing money that's set aside supposedly for projects in communities that are stressed by poverty, but in fact those TIF funds have been used as a slush fund to benefit people who are already wealthy. So there's plenty of money for projects that Emanuel and now Lightfoot might want to see implemented. But there's no money for mental health clinics. So there's something wrong with that picture.
I agree. It's definitely something wrong with that picture. And I'd also like to add, so the city doesn't have enough money to fund teachers, which we need teachers, or fund mental health clinics, or to fix streets even. But it's okay to basically create a huge military force that we call the police. So I think that speaks about the priorities of Chicago. We will rather militarize the city and basically make sure that the 10% gets their cut rather than to ensure that all citizens are safe and taken care of.
Okay. We have a caller, so caller, you're on the air.
Good evening. How you doing? I'm
Go
going to
ahead,
make
caller.
a prediction. I want to make a prediction, and there's any indication how history going to go. We had another woman mayor similar to her that made all these promises and all that, and they wind up being a one-term mayor because she talked out both sides of her mouth. When you got a lot of city employees, like the fire department, police department, at one time with the person CHA, they wind up being a one-term mayor. And she calls certain people evil. And look what happened to the former superintendent. The woman is not consistent. But yet, we got this guy in the city council that made a lot of money, and she haven't done anything to force him out of city council. If I'm wrong about anything, stop me. And
Is anybody hearing this caller?
can you hear me?
Okay. All right.
Can you hear me now?
I couldn't make out what the caller was saying,
I
but
call back.
if you heard it, go ahead and respond.
No, she's right. She's absolutely right. I mean, but I don't. What mayor are you talking about? One-term mayor. Oh, thought she was there.
Okay. Well, let's continue. Are you going to roll those graphics now? Okay. Let's talk about the TJ. Since you mentioned the police terrorizing the community, and I think that's a good way to put it. When Lightfoot was campaigning for mayor, she kind of cozied up to the Black Lives Matter people and others who were critical of the performance of the police in the communities of color particularly. And she wasn't so sure about the cop academy. She didn't come out against it, but she had a lot of criticism about it, particularly that it was imposed on the people by Rahm Emanuel without any community input. Now the mayor is telling us that not enough money has been set aside for the police academy. She wants a super police academy, spending even more millions of dollars on the super cop academy. And I haven't been aware of any community input. So I don't think people in the community are telling her, you know, we want to spend even more money on the cop academy. But that's what she's going to do. Now, what's wrong with that picture?
That's definitely going against public opinion, because public opinion, at least from my understanding, that there's already enough police out there. Why keep spending more money to add more people and weapons to the force? And also the fact that you try to put the police academy on the west side,
Yeah.
which they could use another school or store or some economical development, but not a police academy. So that again, it speaks to the priority of the city. It's better to have more police on the streets than help out communities that could use extra money for services, streets, etc.
Yeah. Well, again, there's always money for the projects that fit the priorities of the administration, and I would argue the business community, because it's they want an occupation force in the communities of color, to keep people in line. It really has nothing to do, in my opinion, with protecting the lives of the people who are there. I mean, there are enough shootings by police of community members, to demonstrate that they're not there to quote serve and protect, but they have a different purpose in those communities.
I mean, my opinion is the more police we have, the more violence in each of our communities. We don't need any more police. We don't need a cop academy or a super cop academy whatsoever. What we need is an elective police board, elected by the people, that the people will approve, because the people who are on that board right now are selected by the mayor. And my understanding is that none of them have the interests of their own, not even their own communities, the business, only the business community. And if it goes like this, I can see down the line where they're gonna have police on every block, patrolling black and brown communities and Latinx communities, just to see who they can shoot first. It's triggering to even think about that, but it's the reality. If we keep on going in that direction, that's why we need to get out there and continue to fight.
I agree. And since we're talking about mental health, to tie it into mental health, if we go ahead and build the police academy, I think it sends a message that the city will continue to put people in jail, especially people with mental health, instead of people with lived experience of mental health. I'm sorry, instead of giving the resources that they need. And in fact, from what I read for the consent decree, even though there are some reforms going on, the power is still in the police hand to provide everything to try to provide people with services, or to, worst case scenario, put them in jail or kill them. So I think what that needs to happen is we have to put more power back into the community and allow the community to not only help people with lived experience with mental health, but also address that while it is a issue to tackle, we have to destigmatize it too.
Right. Well, I remember when that young man, Antonio Laguerre, was killed. His father had called the police because his son Antonio, needed help.
Mm-hmm.
But these cops, of course, were not skilled at dealing with somebody who was in a mental health crisis. So Laguerre ended up being killed. And for good measure, they killed the neighbor too. I mean, this kind of trigger-happy approach is just all too common. There have been other examples. The latest outrage wasn't in Chicago, but it was someplace in Florida where the cops were pursuing a couple of guys who stuck up a jewelry store, and they commandeered a UPS truck, the stick-up artists, and drove away with all these cops in pursuit. A traffic jam ensued. The truck was caught in the traffic jam, and the cops just opened fire. And the two robbers were killed, but so was the truck driver, and another innocent bystander. I mean, and the former chief of police in Miami-Dade said that was not handled properly. But that's, it's all too common, that the cops resort to violence.
I mean, there is a training right now that the police take. I think it's once or twice a year on how to deal with people with mental illness. But let's be honest. I mean, how many people are in the force that actually have that training? About only just a couple,
And keep in mind, it's not mandatory at the moment, so they can still opt out.
Yeah.
And even for those who trying to learn, I mean, it's hard because that means retraining to think about mental health in a way that is not, stereotypical.
Yeah.
as we're talking right now, I'm thinking about my Latinx community. There's not too many people in the police force that know how to speak Spanish, and if a person who's having a mental health crisis only knows Spanish, how are you gonna help them?
Yeah.
Or just say if there's a crisis going on in, let's say, Washington Park or Roseland, and the police is being called for a mental health crisis. One, more likely the police officer may be white, or even if the police officer is of color, because they don't understand people with disabilities or people with lived experience with mental health, they will assume that they committed a crime or they being angry and trying to harm somebody, when in fact it's not the case. It's more like they need help.
I'm gonna give you one example because I'm looking at the time. One example is I live on the north side. By the way, anybody on the north side? Ooh, ooh.
Those others?
So I live on the north side, and I live in a building where there's plenty of people who have mental health mental health problems, mental health issues, or illness. And I see the difference between the south side and west side versus the north side. If you're having a mental health crisis on the north side, they take you right away to the hospital. Versus on the south and west side, if you're having a mental health crisis, shoot and kill.
Or if you
Yeah.
or if you like a minister, they'll try to pray it away if police are not involved.
Okay. Yeah, well, how has that worked? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think a key thing here, in terms of addressing the problem of the police in the communities of color, is to get community control of the police. Chewy mentioned that. There's an ordinance that's before the council. I think there are 19 council members who are signed on to this proposal to institute community control of the police. The police should be responsible to the people that they're supposedly serving. You know, in fact, not just in terms of propaganda. So, but that ordinance, I'm sure, is not supported by Mayor Lightfoot, but that's one of the things that I think needs to be done, which would be a real reform. But not surprisingly, the powers that be are not in support of that, because they want to maintain control of the cops. Because if the police are an occupation army in the communities of color, as I suggested, then they don't want to turn the occupiers over to the people that they're occupying. So it's going to be a struggle to wrest control of the cops away from the agents of the status quo. Well, I think we need to wind this up. We're almost at the end of the show, and I want to thank TJ. And Chewy for being our guests here today, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the monthly program of the Gay Liberation Network.